Okay, let's start again. Hello, welcome to the Linux channel. I'm Wendell. I owe you some videos. There's 2 videos coming that are the next 2 parts in a series on gaming on Linux. And a lot has happened in the last few months. Steam supports gaming on Linux, DXVK and Vulkan. DXVK Vulkan emulation is moving at record pace. There's a lot of really hilarious stuff around that. I mean, Steam gaming on Linux is actually in a pretty good spot right now. The funniest thing I think to come out of that is that if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, it actually works better on Steam. Like, they actually have the NVIDIA card pretend to be an AMD card so that games don't try to do weird NVIDIA proprietary stuff with the API interface. But those are videos for another time. I've been working on Z390 motherboards a lot because of the Z390 launch, and I thought that I would give you an update of sort of where things are with virtualization and IOMMU on the actual like Z390 boards and chipsets, because I've reviewed a lot of boards. I've got 2 boards in the hopper. I've also added some new X399 boards thanks to deals and specials and open boxes stuff going on at Micro Center. I've added an X399A from Asus and the Meg Creation, MSI X399 Meg Creation, which is a really super high-end Threadripper board in terms of power delivery, but mysteriously it lacks 10 gigabit Ethernet, and so that'll add to the the X399 Aorus Extreme from Gigabyte, which is a 2nd gen Threadripper board and does have 10 gig Ethernet, and all of our other X399 reviews. But Z390, I mean, look at it. Z390, 8 cores, 16 threads. If you're going to shell out $600 for a processor, that's sort of getting into X299 territory. But what about virtualization? What's the state of virtualization? And we've got new motherboards. Like, I've got the Z370 Ace, which I've reviewed already and done a lot of Linux testing on, but the IOMMU situation on this new 8-core CPU is really honestly not great. With the 7700K and the 6700K, you've got 16 PCI Express lanes. That hasn't changed even with our new 8-core. But those 16 PCI Express lanes on some of these newer motherboards, the motherboard breaks it out as by 8 by 4 by 4 on the expansion slots. So you've got 3 physical by 16 slots, but you could run devices off of the CPU lanes, so it doesn't bottleneck. It doesn't bottleneck into the the interfaces. The DMI interface is only PCI Express 4.0, PCI Express 3.0 by 4, which is about 4 gigabytes per second. So if you run 2 M.2s, it'll bottleneck. I've got a different video on that coming out this weekend on the main channel, so you can check that out. So, like, this board gives you 3 expansion slots to the CPU using those 16 CPU lanes. So if you just have 1 GPU, it'll run it by 16. If you got 2 GPUs, it'll run it by 8 by 8. But if you got 2 GPUs and something else, it'll run it by 8 by 4 by 4, or like a GPU and a 10 gig Ethernet card and like some other high-speed peripheral, it'll run it at by 8 by 4 by 4 if you use it in the by 16 expansion slots, which is kind of cool because you could get a PCI Express 4 to M.2 adapter and run one of your M.2 off of the CPU and one off the chipset, and it doesn't bottleneck nearly as badly. That's almost no bottleneck, in fact. So that actually works really exceptionally well. So I think that the 8-core, having 8 cores, would be ripe for virtualization. The bad news is that every Z390 board I've tested groups all of the CPU devices into one IOMMU group. So if you want to run one, like you're going to do an add-in Vega graphics card for your host and an add-in NVIDIA card for your virtual machine, you're not going to be able to do it, at least not without the ACS patch, which is probably not stable when we're talking about something as high bandwidth as a graphics card. At least it hasn't been in my experience, especially with mixing, like, say, Vega devices. So it's unfortunate that Intel is not breaking up the CPU lanes anymore. Now, on at least some Z270 and Z170 motherboards, when you were running peripherals in like a by 8 by 8 configuration with those CPU lanes, you were seeing the devices in different IOMMU groups. So I've created a thread on the Level 1 Text forums, which is linked in the description below. So if you bought Z370 or Z390 and you want to share your IOMMU groups, and especially if you have, multiple devices or whatever, that would be good, because I'd kind of like to build a catalog. I think when Z370 launched, with like the pre-launch UEFI, there was still IOMMU separation on some motherboards. But as time has gone on, and I've sort of been doing retesting, the Z370 with the 6-core, there's no separation of the CPU lanes anymore. So if you've got a motherboard that's running it like by 8x8, both of those by 8 devices on the CPU lane are in the same IOMMU group. And of course that's bad because you have to pass through everything in a particular IOMMU group to a virtual machine if you want those peripherals to run. So that's unfortunate because with 8 cores, you've got, 4 cores for the guest and 4 cores for your host. That's actually pretty cool. I mean, that's actually like kind of an awesome situation to be in. I mean, that's where we were with Ryzen a couple of years ago, but you get the clock speed advantage on the Intel side of things, but it doesn't really work all that well. Now, in terms of IOMMU separation for the peripherals, things actually attached to the chipset, that actually seems to be pretty good, which is the opposite problem of AMD. So on AMD, there's great separation for like your M.2 slot and like by 8x8 on Z370, or I mean on X370 and X470, the AMD chipsets. But anything that runs through the as media chipset, like the other USB controllers and like the PCI Express 2.0 interfaces and secondary M.2 slots, all of those are grouped together. So it's baffling. It's like, why? Why is it like this? Now, X299, Intel's higher end desktop platform, it doesn't have any of the shenanigans. Generally, everything on the chipset and everything on the motherboard is all isolated really well. And generally, X299 has been less of a headache than AMD's platform for like long-term IOMMU separation, stuff like that. But AMD is basically okay. By the time the 2000 series CPUs have come out, basically it's okay on the AMD platform. But there's a new Agesa coming down the pike. So 1.1.0.6. That brings us to our next topic. Have you been using, later versions of the Linux kernel on AMD's platform and it hangs on the SEV bug or it hangs during boot? Well, good news. They fixed that. What's actually going on there, I think, is that Epic supports encrypted memory. And so AMD supplied a patch to the Linux kernel to enable support for encrypted memory. But the patch doesn't check to see if you're running an AMD CPU that's not a server CPU. So it tries to enable encrypted memory, the Epic style encrypted memory on Ryzen and Threadripper CPUs, which doesn't actually work. And so that'll cause either the system to hang or like systemd to run in the background and chew up a lot of memory. The good news is that's fixed in the new Agesa. The bad news is that there are some bugs in the new Agesa, especially around running multiple graphics cards. So they're still fixing that. I have some beta BIOSes, and if you want, on the Level 1 forum, I've got a beta BIOS for Gigabyte and I think MSI. I'm pretty sure it's okay for me to post those. Let me double check that. But I can give you a beta, use at your own risk, UEFI, if you want to test it and see if it solves any particular problem, because mostly you have to disable the platform security processor, which is, that AMD patch is like compile in yes instead of a module. And it's like, this is why Linus does not want patches for the kernel to compile not as a module, because you can end up in a situation where your system doesn't boot because it's buggy, which happened to several people and is a problem. But that's getting fixed. So the new Agesa will fix that. And some people are using an even older UEFI to avoid the PSP bug. There's actually a lot more to it than that. But yeah, I mean, I'm really oversimplifying, but there's an Agesa fix coming. And with the Agesa fix, in the video that I'm going to do for you, part 3 and 4 of the virtualization series, I'm just going to say, hey, your X399 motherboard has a UEFI update as of this video. Go grab it, because it's going to be a lot less painful for you to use Linux on this platform, at least newer versions of Linux on this platform, with those updates. So that's exciting. The other thing that I want to draw attention to is Jeff, Looking Glass Jeff. He's been quietly working in the background this entire time, so I'm going to switch angles for a second so we can talk about that. I just grabbed my microphone here because the microphone's got to come with us. Yeah, so check that out. I changed angles. How cool is that? So I can't see the chat anymore. Hopefully I won't break anything. Let's just let's drag the chat over to this other monitor over here so I can sort of keep an eye on things. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so yeah, check this out. If you are into virtualization and all of the cool stuff, speeding up virtualization. Where's it at? Threadripper. Nope. Yeah, here we go. Increasing VFIO VGA performance. Okay, so it turns out when you're using the Q35 chipset that it just basically will sometimes set it up as a PCI device instead of a PCIe device, which means that the device doesn't necessarily run at PCI Express 3.0 speeds, because for power management and some other reasons, when the virtual PCI Express device, the pass-through PCI Express device, is talking to the virtual machine, it doesn't really enable the higher communication speed of PCI Express 3.0. So the situation with PCI Express 3.0 is that it's insanely way faster. And so some people using Looking Glass were having like stutters and weird stuff, especially at higher resolutions. Well, it turns out that that was because there wasn't enough PCI Express bandwidth. And it's like, well, when Jeff was investigating, there wasn't enough PCI Express bandwidth because things were running at 1.1. So with Q35 and the latest patches to QEMU, you can actually patch QEMU and add the whole like PCI Express root complex, and then attach the pass-through device to the virtual like accoutrement that is the entire PCI Express bus, and then the drivers for your video card can properly negotiate and say, hey, let's run at PCI Express 3.0 speeds. Generally, those stutters and other things sort of go away, and that applies whether you're on Intel or AMD. There are some weird things. There are some weird sort of rough edges around this. So this is kind of a long thread, and some people have been trying this on the Level 1 forum. But I wanted to draw attention to it, and I wanted to say, you know, Jeff is doing amazing work here. There's a link to his Patreon in the description, so if you want to support Jeff directly, yes, definitely by all means. I'm trying to figure out how to get him some more hardware and a FreeSync monitor without paying a cajillion dollars on shipping, but I think that probably I'll also end up sending him some X299 stuff, depending on what I can get from the 9th generation X299 stuff, just so he's got another set of hardware to play with and run some experiments on and do some side by sides, because he's got some Threadripper stuff now. But if you want to like be on the bleeding edge of virtualization and have a little bit better performance, or if you had like weird stuttering issues with Looking Glass at higher resolutions and stuff like that, you should check this thread out, because your problem might have been that you were running the PCI Express interface at a lower speed. And actually, this is just sort of I don't know, speed bump, I guess, in the road to virtualization, where it's just going to completely and totally 100% take over the universe. Virtualization, I think, because this kind of stuff really should be built into QEMU, and it should basically, like if you just pick Q35, this kind of thing should happen without really thinking about it. And actually, a lot of this stuff is not really new information. If you look on the mailing list from a long time ago, the experts that actually wrote this talk about Q35 and setting up the full like PCI Express root complex and the whole 9 yards. It's just that knowledge was forgotten or not properly documented or not passed through. So there's a little bit of a rediscovering here. But there's also some bugs in how that actually works, because no one was using it. So it's like you got to go spelunking on the mailing list, and it's like, I don't know. It's like I imagine it's like those guys in the Green Lantern Corps guys are just, you know, sort of doing all the stuff in the background on the mailing list, and it's left up to us plebs to sort of discover things. And that's pretty much it. That's the stuff that I wanted to update you guys on in terms of Z390 and Z370 and the IOMMU group situation, and the cool stuff that's coming on the AMD platform, and the performance breakthroughs that Jeff has had on increasing VFIO performance on Looking Glass. And those are the really important things that I wanted to get out. And hopefully that has not, you know, I've not drug on too long in terms of like this stream or how long this is or anything like that. Yeah, it says we only gone 18 minutes, and I'm going to trim off a little bit off the front because of the audio issue in the beginning. So, woo! So I'll hang out with the chat for a little while longer and answer questions and do all that kind of stuff. So let me switch angles back to the other camera. Okay. Maybe that works. All right. Does anybody have any questions? Penguin X, Penguin Ox, check mark. Gotta have a shot of Orange Crush to keep me going. Diet Orange Crush. It doesn't even have caffeine. Get my caffeine from my tea. Woo! Alright. Yeah, sorry I couldn't really read the chat or engage with it or anything like that. I'll try to read it. When is part 3 and 4 of the GNU Linux video series coming? Well, I just explained what's going on with, like, the hardware end of things. And also the Steam stuff has sort of changed that. So, gotta reshoot 3 and 4. Like, 3 and 4 are actually done. The problem is that if you boot up Ubuntu 18.10 and you have that old Agesa, the system will hang and do weird stuff because of the encrypted memory, because you need to disable, like, the platform security processor, you need to disable that in your kernel. It's not disabled by default in the Ubuntu kernel, at least as of right now, as far as I know. So that's a little bit of a problem. What's your opinion on the IO chiplet? I think that the IO chiplet is probably a good idea. It probably has to contain some kind of cache. Maybe not. I might be wrong about that. I would expect that it contains cache because that would really help with things. But the IO chiplet is kind of a foregone conclusion. I mean, think about like the Northbridge, and then like the Northbridge was merged on chip, and the Northbridge handled memory and IO and everything else. And so, really, the chiplet is just the Northbridge once again. So, I don't think it's going to be a bad thing. Code Blue, do I ditch Windows? Oh, it's getting closer every day. We don't ditch it. You just pack it up in a nice little virtual machine, give it its little sandbox, and then you can move on with your life and still have whatever you need for Windows. See, I think the people that are advocating for Linux as a replacement for Windows, it's never going to be a replacement. It's a different experience. And Linux will do everything that you need to do, and it's fine. But if you expect the Windows experience on Linux, you're going to be disappointed. But if you have to have the Windows experience, you can continue to have the Windows experience and a nice, safe little sandbox while actually learning to compute properly over here. Can't hear me. Thoughts on Rail 8 yet? I'm not sure. IBM is probably going to change Red Hat. I might be going in and out because of the microphone. I'm hoping it's not an audio problem, so I'll try to stay behind the I'll try to stay behind the microphone so that it's really good. But Red Hat 8, the whole IBM thing is going to change Red Hat 8. It's probably going to bring Red Hat a little closer to Fedora in some ways, in terms of like the bleeding edge stuff. But I'm not sure about this IBM thing because IBM has a history of sort of killing things that I love, and so it's like that abusive relationship where it's like you're driving, like there's a crazy person who's driving along. I mean, if I explain this in terms of Futurama, Roberto is driving the vehicle, and like I'm sitting over here, and he's got a knife, and he hasn't stabbed me yet, but he's cackling like a madman. That's kind of like how I see the IBM, because the Roberto is IBM, and yeah. I missed Risk 5 in the forums. I'm really looking forward to that. Risk 5 is so much fun. I've been super busy the last couple of months with a bunch of unplanned crap, but it's mostly dealt with. Well, it's not. I've still probably got another month or two of dealing with that crap. But it's not overwhelming anymore. It's just a lot still. But I have the Risk 5 hardware in hand. Sci 5. I am beyond excited about that. Like, it's really honestly, like, there's actually the Sci 5 people are moving at a million miles an hour. It's extremely exciting because, open hardware. I've also got the Talos stuff on the way. Like, that's going to be another fun one. And I've also got server content coming up. I've got for the last month and a half, I've been testing the Cavium Thunder X2. I've got 16 terabytes of flash in it, 512 gigs of RAM, It is a beastly ARM server. It is ridiculous. It is. We got a skit planned around it. Man, it is. Player 3 has entered the game. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if ARM captures the low and mid tier options for especially Linux-based servers, especially like PostgreSQL and like IO servers and stuff like that. It is really, really good at that. Hello from the Netherlands. How good is X370 versus B350? X370 boards generally have better power delivery, although it's not universally true. X370 will let you run by 8x8 from the CPU PCIe lanes if you're going to have multiple high-speed peripherals that you need that. But if you find a nice B350 board and you don't plan running on, running multiple graphics cards or like a graphics card and high-speed capture peripherals or anything like that, get the B350 and save the money, because honestly the B350 board is probably going to be fine as long as the VRM can deliver. The B350 with like the higher end Ryzen CPUs is where you might, but if like Ryzen 5 is what you're targeting, even like the Ryzen 5 2600X, B350 is probably fine unless it's one of the really low end B350 motherboards. That said, you should be able to get the X370 boards and be fine. What did IBM kill before? OS2, hello. I mean, that's a capital offense if anything. But yeah, IBM. Just look up IBM acquisitions and mergers, and then look at what happened to those products. There's a Wikipedia article that has like a lot of things that I loved. If I remember them, I'll be sad, and I don't want to be sad. Just reading the chat here because that's what you guys like to do. Just check the MSI download site. Yep, there's an update for the newer BIOS. Agesa 1.1.0.2 is a Meg 399 creation. However, it's still marked as beta and not recommended to install. Yes, use it at your own risk. There are some bugs around the multiple graphics cards, but it fixes the PSP bug. So there's that. I only just discovered the multiple graphics card issue myself, and that was only after doing terrible, terrible things. Any news on ECC support for Raven Ridge? Yes, it works as of like kernel 4.16. We tested it, and I think I did a video on it. Did I not release that? Oh my. I need to add that to my to-do list. What do you use as your main desktop? As if I have one main desktop. Most of my time is split between Fedora and Debian, followed by Windows, and then like some other operating systems, and then like Mac OS at the bottom. Regularly I have to use like pretty much everything. J.W. Dickelson, $2. The courtroom skit, glorious. Thank you. Can you talk about what delayed the LVM cache tiered storage videos? So I've got the tiered storage software thing from Inmodus. It's commercial, but it's kind of expensive. It actually does work really well. There are some bugs that I found. Like I started looking at Bcache and like the whole metadata caching versus regular caching, and then I started doing the RAID video style experimentation where like I would introduce some corruption or an unclean shutdown, and I had some very, very strange results. And I'm not sure if that's because I was doing things too haphazardly or if there's like legit some actual bugs or some problems there. I plan to circle back on that. There are some people on the forum that were helping me do stuff for that, like run the testing and like the setup and make sure that I'm not making some sort of terrible mistake, because I don't use those with. I just use ZFS with the ZIL and all that kind of stuff. I want to make sure I'm dotting my I's and crossing my T's, because I think the LVM cache thing should work okay, but I think I'm probably not going to recommend Bcache. Are my NetApp storage boxes still running? Yes, they are, and they are glorious. And upgraded one to, I think we have 24 8TB hard drives in one of them. That will probably show up in the office tour video, which should come as soon as the renovations are completely done. Waiting on one little area to be finished with the renovations, and we're adding a wiring ladder to the server closet, and then it's like, oh my gosh, look, there's a tour. Things are happening. Did you fix the Fedora 28 issue with the Dell 9370 when you close the lid? It jumps in time. Yes. Any recommendations for a virtualization host OS? Is Debian plus KVM good enough, or is Unraid worth it? Debian plus KVM generally I would recommend over Unraid. Proxmox is not a bad choice either. I think you guys will soon see that in another thing on a different channel, but I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to let them, it'll be fine. But yeah, Proxmox. What's that RAID card doing there? This one? It's not a RAID card, it's an HBA. Oh, well, I guess it could be a RAID card depending on how it's flashed. IBM and some other companies were like, "This is a RAID card." It was never a RAID card. It was never a RAID card. This is an HBA. IBM did some black magic voodoo with one of the BIOSes for that to make it show up like it was a RAID card, but it wasn't. It really just that was hackery. That's what that was. What's your opinion on Straits, the ZFS alternative by Red Hat? You know what? I haven't tried it. Cubes OS videos planned in the future. I keep coming back to Cubes about once every 3 or 4 months. The thing that's a little off-putting about Cubes, and they're not wrong, is that they don't want to do hardware pass-through because you can't trust the hardware because the system bus is not hardened enough to be able to deal with it. Which is true, but you know, it is possible for things to escape the sandbox. So it really depends on how pedantic that you want to be. But the Cubes OS people are doing really, really good work. If I were a billionaire, I would probably fund their stuff, even though I don't completely agree with it. And then also probably fund another project to be Cubes plus hardware pass-through, which is going to be a less secure version of Cubes, but not bother the main Cubes people with that, because I don't want to bog them down with pedantic minutia and have them do their thing that they're good at, because they're very good at it. Cubes is very, very good, and the Cubes team seem to be exceptionally talented. And so I wouldn't want to be like, here's $1 million, I must have this feature. It should just be, here's $1 million, you do your thing, figure it out. And then also, can we get some, let's spin up a new project with another $1 million to actually do stuff. But not in a position to do that. Have you ever written Rust code? Only for experimentation, like just to experiment, which was a lot of fun. Although I find myself leaning more toward Go than Rust. Yeah, I know Google. It's fine. Have you ever considered updating your NVMe RAID tutorial on the ROG Hero to explain it is basically software RAID? I've got an NVMe RAID video coming out this weekend. I think this weekend. But I already explained that it's software RAID in the video that I did tearing down the security of the AMD RAID software. So you should probably check out that video because I talked about how it is software RAID and it installs an entire web server to run in order to like configure it. Dell 710 or Ryzen build for VMware? The Ryzen build. Dell 710 is too old at this point. Unless you need just gobs of RAM, but still Ryzen. I think that's it. I think that's probably, unless 5-minute warning. 5-minute warning. How about that? 5-minute warning. This is a short, quick, easy stream. Not too complicated. Not too crazy. No need for me to ramble on. Look at this. It's so exciting. I'll have separate motherboard reviews of the X390A from Asus and the Meg Creation. Those are in the hopper. I literally just got those boards. Like, I know the X390A is from like a year ago, but I literally just got it because it was on sale at Micro Center, which is, I love getting stuff on sale. Makes me excited because like, I paid less than retail and there's no problems with it. Go has a big runtime with garbage collection. Rust now has non-lexical lifetime. Oh, you. Any tips on getting VLANs to work on top of an image bridge? That's going to be tricky. You really need to do something like a monthly top 5 rig recommendation. We are working on a major overhaul of the Level 1 website, and builds should be a lot easier to post, because I can do a video version of it, but I find that I would probably be able to produce more content, taking pictures and short videos and uploading links to that. And so like for this channel, it's like, oh, I discovered something interesting. Blam, there's an article. And then if the article does well, then I can have something to talk about. Are you interested in showing how to do K8S, preferably Nomad setups and labs, or maybe FPGA fun, bought a new Arduino? Yeah, maybe. I'm actually teaching a lab this semester that involves Arduinos, so that could be a lot of fun. So can you say anything more about the 2400G situation with Linux? Generally, if you're running a newer kernel like 4.16 or later, the 2400G should basically be okay on Linux. I mean, there's a few gotchas. Well, the 2400G as a desktop processor with an iGPU that lets you run desktop graphics is okay. Gaming still leaves a little bit to be desired for a couple of reasons, but it's not bad, honestly, and the issues are getting ironed out. Hello, have you already talked about the PCIe3 QEMU patches, or did I miss it? Yes, I did, but there's a link in the description for you to go read more and get the patches and do all sorts of fun stuff. And give Jeff money, because Jeff deserves a lot of money, really, honestly. He's doing amazing work. Any ideas on how to fix a stuttering issue with the RX 580s on Linux? Double check that it's not your performance governor. Could it be your performance governor? Use CPU Freak CTL to set the governor to performance. If you're using GNOME, I would suggest at least temporarily trying a different desktop environment, because GNOME has an extra compositing frame that it inserts, so everything's delayed by 1 frame, which can cause some issues. Most people on the forum, believe it or not, that have had stuttering issues with like the 570 and the 580 has been because the CPU is in a like a lower power performance governor. If you are using GNOME, there's a CPU Freak extension thingy for GNOME, and if you get that, it'll show you what your CPU is running at, and it'll let you set the performance governor through the GUI with just a couple of clicks. I love that thing. The thing is awesome. I use that thing on my laptop here. I use that thing on pretty much anything. So you should probably install that, and that may fix your stuttering issue. Krista got the iPad, I think. Have you had it in your hands? Does it? I have not had a chance. Star Trek tablets. I haven't actually gotten a chance to hold it. Like, so Level 1 got an iPad for Krista for designs and stuff, and we got a review coming up for that on the main channel. And Krista is really enjoying the iPad and the pencil, and she's like super artistic and, you know, really good at that stuff. And she's having a blast with the art side of it. So if you know somebody that's artsy, that might be a good, albeit expensive, you know, holiday present for them. Although, wait for the review. Not gaming on my 2400G, just office and web stuff. Well, you should be fine as long as you're using a newer kernel. If you want, you can install Ubuntu and then use UKUU to update your kernel, and that'll probably take care of any issue that you're having. What do you think about the proprietary module still in current RISC-V hardware? Do you think that there will be completely open hardware? I think that anybody that's really worried about that, you will have the option of building your own or working around it. The sci-fi people seem to be really super behind the open source end of things, but at some point you have to license some things from other people. But depending on what you want to do, you don't necessarily have to run those binary blobs. Like, you can still get the functionality, you just might have reduced performance or something like that. As far as I know, like, it's not super limiting as far as like the platform itself goes, depending on what you want to do. So like if you want a network interface, it's like, well, we need the network driver for this, or like the PCI Express interface, and it's like, well, some of those things are encumbered by patents. So if there's widespread adoption, a lot of those problems just go away. Yeah, Apple, I don't know. Wait for the review and see what she says, but what she's been able to do with it is honestly very impressive. And you know, having a bunch of surfaces around, she did use the Surface Pen and all of the stuff with the Surface, which I think was better than the first generation Apple Pencil. So that's something interesting. ECC on Ryzen 2 working good? Yes. We have a separate video on 128 gigs of Crucial 2666. You should check that out. That's on the main channel. But if you just Google Threadripper ECC 2666, you'll probably find our results. There is a separate video on this G-Skill 2933 kit coming out, where I recommend that unless you're running Linux as your desktop operating system, this is probably the kit to get for Threadripper if you want 128 gigs of RAM. This G-Skill kit is amazing because it's 2933, which works. It's 8 sticks of memory, and generally I didn't have a problem on it. Honestly, the ROG Zenith was the only motherboard that I've had trouble with 128 gigs of memory on, and all of the first gen boards except for the ASRock Fatality took at least a little bit of fiddling to get it dialed in, maybe a little slight increase in voltage or whatever. The some of the boards I had to like reseat the CPU, but you'll have to wait for the memory review to see that. Is Ryzen good with FreeNAS and FreeBSD distributions? Yes. That should do it. That should about do it. Where's your cup of coffee? I don't have a cup of coffee, but one of the viewers, Muffalo, sent me this. Recognize it? It's usually got tea in it. That's the hint I'll give you. But for now, it's Diet Orange Crush. I think that'll just about do it for this live stream. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out, and I'll catch you later.